Hi, everyone. Today, let's talk about the open option interest for next week. Then we'll talk economic calendar just for a moment. Then we'll go over the charts. Then we'll talk about my results for the day and my thoughts going into Monday. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So looking at the open interest for next week, I do want to highlight there's still lots of puts in the system. This is for Friday, the 10th. You can see the put-call ratio still at 2.1, very high puts to calls, which in my opinion is allowing this rally that we're having right now. You can see huge number of puts here at 395. Not very many calls until you get to around 410. Some calls at 405 and here at 400, but decent puts at 400 as well. So I would expect to finish between 400 and 410 for next week. I don't think we'll get above 410, but with the recent rally we've had, it's certainly possible. Looking at the calls in the market right now, you can see still lots of 400 puts, 405 calls. It would make sense to finish in between there somewhere. So we might see a little bit of a pullback tomorrow. You can see what the money looks like. But really, I want to talk about the put-call ratio here for the 17th. This is the third Friday of the month. Put-call ratio still very similar, but huge amount of options in the market, almost 5 million already. Lots of 390 puts here on SPY. Max pain is 400. Lots of puts and calls here at 400. Probably not going to finish above 410. Similar to the last chart here. Between 400 and 410 makes sense, but any higher than 400, these calls are going to start to make a little bit of money. And then moving over to options in the market, you can see 400, still a big level, probably going to finish fairly close to that level. Probably not above 405, but really anywhere between 400 and 405 would be good. You can see how steep that put wall is here to the downside. Less steep to the call side, but still lots of money to be made here. Huge amount of options on that expiration. Moving over to the economic calendar, we talked about it yesterday, but we had services, PMI, and ISM services pretty much at expectations. Not a lot to add here. We had a Fed governor and Fed president talk. They basically said that they're good with 25 basis points and that they do support that decision. Moving over to next week, we've talked about most of this already, but I do want to highlight Fed Chair Powell talks to the House here at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. Obviously, everything he says affects the markets, and it can be pretty important. I don't expect him to say anything outside of the usual. We haven't had any major reports really since the last time he spoke, but it is interesting here. And then we have the JOLTS report at the same time, Beige Book, fairly interesting. And then we have unemployment rate here on Friday. This affected the market a lot last time. It was much higher than expected. If it comes in much higher than expected once again, that would be pretty interesting. And then we have the unemployment rate. This continues to stay extremely low. If you are expecting a recession, you would want this to start ticking up a little bit, and it really just hasn't done that quite yet. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&P 500 here on the 4-hour and the daily chart. Not much change from yesterday. Obviously, we went straight to the moon after launching yesterday. Huge green bars here, got all the way past the 55 and 144 EMAs here on the 4-hour chart. Getting very close to testing the volume weighted average here, which is sitting at 405.37. Probably a good price target for the SPY here going into Monday's session. Looking to fill this gap going back to 406.04, which also does coincide with this trend line that we had up here as well. So lots of things saying that this is going to be the price target. I'm sure we'll get a reaction here and maybe a little bit of a downtick. Hopefully we find support and then continue back up into this area of higher volume on the daily chart. If we got back into the zone, then you would be looking for a higher high potentially, but certainly could be looking for a double top as well. You can see momentum on the daily chart is stepping down. It was stepping down for a couple days here, but we finally got a really significant step down yesterday and then a bigger one here today. Looking like we could move into bullish momentum over the next 3 to 4 days of trading. Otherwise, 4-hour, very high momentum. Certainly an area where you could start to see a little bit of a slowdown. 4-hour volume saying that between 406 and 407 is going to be an area of resistance. And then we can't forget we do have a gap all the way up to around 408.25 also. So looking to fill all these gaps here on the SPY. And once we start getting into this upper region, If we do make it that far, then we have to see if we're making a double top or if we're looking for a higher high. Moving over to the NASDAQ, similar thesis. We pushed up really strongly again here today, came into a zone of resistance. We've been watching this 341 level for a long time. This is a level where we had multiple gap throughs going back to recent price action. If we can get above that level, then we're probably looking for prices up around 303, 304, looking for a gap fill at about 303.30. We're very close to VWAP here on the daily chart, sitting at 356. So that will be an area of resistance, definitely. Otherwise, momentum ticking in the bullish direction. Very bullish here on the 4-hour, not quite overbought yet. Hourly momentum on the SPY as well as the NASDAQ is overbought already, so certainly could look for a little bit of a pullback after the huge rally that we've had. But if you're going to try to trade that, definitely be very careful. It's a very strong rally right now, and it certainly could continue. There's nothing to say that it has to stop quite yet. Moving over here to the Russell and the Dow on the daily charts, you can see very strong movement on both of them. We tested the 144 EMA here on the daily chart, rocketed up 3 big green candles in a row, looking at resistance here at 335. VWAP here on the daily chart sitting at 335.73, so probably going to overshoot this resistance a little bit, test those EMAs before we find any kind of resistance. Momentum on the daily chart looks very bullish. Looking at the Russell, similar thesis. Momentum continues to look very bullish. We're testing VWAP already here at 191.59. Got just above that here after hours. Looking for a retest of that 195.15 level, which we had been watching here previously. And then we'll see whether this is going to be a double top or if we're going to make a new high here. The Russell has been very strong, and you can see is very strong here again today. But either way, everything is bullish, and we should expect that to continue for the short term. Moving over to Apple and Tesla on the 4-hour, you can see Apple almost got to our price target. We were watching that 152 level. We stopped at 151, still very bullish on the day. You can see all the EMAs and VWAP are now below price action, so that indicates that we are going to have some more bullish movement, in my opinion. Not overbought here yet. Momentum very bullish. Looking at Tesla, we did gap through that 193.50 level that we've continued to talk about. You can see we tested it here briefly and then continued higher. Retested that area of highest volume here around 199.50 or 200, right in that zone. And then we sold off from there. That did coincide with the 4-hour 21 EMA as well. Tesla looking not quite as strong as everything else. It was very strong coming into this zone, so it might be a little bit overbought in the short term. If this does end up being a lower high here, and then we get a sell-off through this 193.50 level, that would be very bearish for Tesla. Really, you would want to see this continue higher, at least retest this previous high, and then continue to chop in this zone, certainly possible. But if we're going to go higher from here, we really have to get above this 214 level that we've been watching for so long. We have not been able to stay above it at any point here recently. And if we do come into that zone, you should expect to find rejection once again. But of course, we have to watch that reaction and see exactly what happens. Moving over to transports, not much to add here. We're continuing to trend upwards, looking for that upper trend line around 246, 247. Certainly could stall out here just based on the daily chart. We're almost at that previous high from Thursday the 16th. 238.47 looks like a decent level. We almost tagged it here, just came up a little bit short. But looking at the volume profile, if we do get above that level, we should really expect to get back up to about 241, 242 at least. Then we'll see what happens in this previous consolidation zone, and then whether we're going to push back up to this next trend line, like we said, at 248, 249. Momentum, bullish, RSI, bullish. Same thing here on the 4-hour chart. Did get a slight step down here on the MACD. On the 4-hour chart, could just be after hours price action, pulling it down slightly. You can see we actually had a little bit of a downtrend here previously in momentum. But then we did continue in the bullish direction shortly after, so do keep that in mind. And the MACD EMAs here are still very bullish. Moving over to consumer staples versus discretionary. Discretionary continues to look stronger. We're still well above the 200 SMA and 144 EMAs, indicating that this is still a bullish trend. Looking at the volume profile here on discretionary, we're right in that zone of highest volume. You want to see it push through here, get into this previous consolidation area around 147, 148. If we can get through there, then you're looking at probably 150 to 151 as your previous zone. Going back to this previous zone, so a little bit of upside resistance here, certainly something to watch, but otherwise looks stronger here on discretionary compared to staples. Really couldn't get back into this previous zone of highest volume. You can see we've been consolidating in this zone for a while, and we're not back into that region. We're kind of retesting the lows here, which is not what you would want to see. Honestly, I would like to see this move back in here if we are going to sell off. But if you're bullish, you want staples to kind of stay in this lowering zone, allow discretionary to continue higher here, indicating that we are in a risk-on style market. Moving over to semiconductors here for a moment on the 4-hour and daily charts, you can see we did have another bullish day. We're retesting VWAP here on the daily chart, which is interesting. Otherwise, momentum moving higher, RSI moving higher, not a ton of volume behind this move. That's pretty interesting. You can see we did have a large amount of volume going back to Thursday the 23rd, and that was a pretty bullish candle, probably a good indicator that we were going to get a bullish breakout at some point. You can see that area of highest volumes on the daily chart still sitting down at 239.80 or so. So probably solid support in that zone. But like I said, we're at VWAP right now, 245.23. Certainly an area where we could find some resistance. But we'll have to keep an eye on that. If it does continue through, then we're probably looking at 249 to 50 as your next zone of resistance right in this previous zone. You can see the volume profile does support that. 4-hour volume profile says about 252 is going to be your highest resistance, pretty much right at the tops of these previous candles. If we do pull that trend line down, you can see we'll probably find resistance in that 248 level, which does coincide with that first volume blip. Otherwise, we're still looking to fill this gap up to 246.11. And like we said before, all the indicators are to the upside here on semiconductors. Moving over to the 2-year and 10-year yield on the 4-hour, we talked about this one being overbought yesterday. And of course, we did get a little bit of sell-off. 2-year held up fairly well. 10-year sold off quite a bit back to these previous highs. Waiting to see if this is going to hold. If this level does break, then we're probably looking at 3.89, 3.9 back in this previous zone. That breaks, then we're looking at 3.85, 3.86. If this continues down, though, that should be pretty bullish for stocks. That'll be interesting. Certainly, this is still an uptrend, so don't discount the fact that this could certainly bounce right back up to 405, maybe even 4.1. That would be pretty crazy here on the 10-year. Similarly, on the 2-year, bearish conditions right now certainly could bounce. Maybe we come down to 4.8, 4.79 back in this zone, bounce off the 55 EMA, and then we push back up to the previous highs around 4.95, maybe even all the way up to 5. If we make a new high, that would be pretty crazy. But right now, we do have some short-term bearish conditions on yields. Moving over to the dollar, man, we called this one perfectly. So we had that double top, we saw bearish movement, figured that we would get a little bit of a bounce just based on the bullish price action on the 4-hour momentum that we had. Sure enough, we got a bullish bounce, came into resistance just before that trend line, and then sold off really dramatically, allowing stocks to go much, much higher here. Certainly looking for some support in this 104.40 level, 104.41. If that breaks, then we're looking to the previous low around 104.14, 104.12. That would be interesting at this next previous low. If that breaks, then we're probably looking back at the 144 EMA here on the 4-hour chart, currently sitting at 103.73. Going back to the 1-hour chart here, you can see price action is below all of the EMAs. That's pretty bearish. You definitely don't want to see that if you are trading this to the bull side. Of course, this is the shorter time frames. 4 hours still showing bullish price action above the 144 and 200 SMAs, but this is quite a bit of downward potential before we find support. That would also coincide with this previous low for consolidation that we had in that 103.80 level. So overall, short-term bearish based on these conditions, looking for a break of this previous support level and then a break of this midpoint here. And if we get down to 103.80, we should expect equities to be quite a bit higher than they are right now. Moving over to JNK, not everything is all roses here. We did rally, we did support the rally, but it looks like we're kind of topping out at these previous highs here. It's definitely not what you want to see if we are going to continue higher. You'd want to see this continue to break this previous trend line and start to push up, start to fill some of these gaps that we have left here on this recent downtrend. But right now, it looks like we're getting some rejection off of the 144 EMA on the hourly chart. We did get above this area of highest volume on the hourly, which is interesting. You can see lots of low volume areas as we gapped down through this previous zone. So if we can get above probably 92, we can probably push to 93 fairly easily. That would be interesting. But right now, it does look like the hourly momentum is rolling over a little bit, very close to overbought conditions. And it certainly wouldn't surprise me if this did come back down to maybe 91.20, 91.30 back in this previous zone, find some support, and then push higher if we are going to continue higher here. JNK just looks a little exhausted based on this end of day price action. Moving over to TLT just for a moment, you can see we called the island reversal, got the island reversal, looks very bullish, looking to see if we retest that 102.50 level. This is a long-term zone of resistance. You can see very little volume around that level. If we do break through there, then we're probably looking at 104 as your next zone of resistance. Lots of gaps similar to JNK as we were moving down on this previous downtrend. Looking to see if we can get up to 104, retest the 55 and 144 EMAs here on the daily chart. Those are currently sitting at 104.39 and 104.41. So back in this previous zone, certainly an area of resistance if we do get back up that high. But right now, everything is a little bit bullish, looking at a couple of resistance levels toward the upside. It's also worth noting here on the 4-hour chart, the volume bars here were much, much higher than they have been recently. So we had building volume, looked decent. Then we had that big sell-off, but volume was staying fairly high. And then today, volume really took off, much higher than we've been here recently, going all the way back to 9 February, really as the area that we had the most volume before that. And that was a huge red bar coming off. You can see big volume there as we move down. But right now, big volume on the up move, indicating that this is probably going to continue and look for that 104 price, in my opinion. Moving over to the VIX, man, we got this one almost spot on, right? So we were coming down, looked like we were going to hold potentially here, broke through that level, and then went straight down. Talked about this previous low being an area of support. We wicked that almost to the point here. Talked about 1820, got down to about 1816. Looked great. Looked like we got a little bit of a bounce in that area, so definitely interesting. Do need to watch this on Monday. If we do start to see a little bit of a rally in the VIX, that could be bad for markets. Got to oversold conditions, very close here on the hourly chart. Daily chart still showing bearish momentum and bearish movement on RSI. In terms of next price targets, it's quite a bit lower than where we are now. I don't know if we're going to get that low. Originally, I thought 1950 was going to be the bottom. We talked about 1820 being a possibility, but this is starting to look a little extended here now after this really consistent down move that we've had. Of course, we could get down to 1760, 1750 back at this previous low from 1 February. Got a couple of trend lines in this previous zone that we could watch also. If we do get that low, certainly be pretty hesitant to the bullish side on equities. I would certainly look for a bounce in this area if we do get that low. But like I said before, we could absolutely bounce off of this 1815, 1820 zone, get a retrace back up to 20. Give equities a little bit of time to cool, maybe even up to resistance, and then we get a bigger sell-off back down to that 1730 zone. Couple of scenarios there, but watch this first zone, see if we bounce early on Monday. If we do get rejection, come down to that 17 zone. Be very hesitant to the bullish side, in my opinion. Moving over to my results for the day, pretty good, plus around 800. I did take off my Q position because I think we might be getting a little bit of a pullback on the Qs and the SPY on Monday. Allow me to sell that option for a little bit better price than what we have right now. Absolutely, the markets could continue higher, but I did leave the IWM position on here, 190 put for Monday. Sold it for 55 cents and it's already in a 22 profit. Very close to break even here on my IRA. That would be very cool. See a little bit of a profit on the board for the first time this year. Individual account, nice gains there. Pretty easy trading today. Everything was straight up, so do keep that in mind. But I've definitely messed that up before, so it's good to be able to take advantage of it. Like I said, everything could go bullish, but I think we might get a little bit of a pullback on Monday and allow for a re-entry to the bull side. But of course, I'll be watching the markets to see exactly what we get. We might even do a little bit of posturing before the Fed comments. Jay Powell might have some interesting things to say on Wednesday, and we could certainly see markets go into a holding pattern until we have his comments. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of the charts or the markets. Do you think we're going to continue much higher, or are we due for a little bit of a pullback? If you got any value out of this video, make sure you like and subscribe. Getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers, so that would be pretty awesome. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.